Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on August 30th, 2021 at approximately 9:14 a.m. PST. Ran into a problem yesterday. In case you didn't notice, I didn't actually get my recording done yesterday. But the reason is actually quite simple, and you've probably gone through it yourself. Now, the last couple of days, I've been talking about fear and its impact. Well, here's something that I ran into yesterday, and this is why I tell people I'm not perfect by any functional stretch. Yesterday, I did something that brought me face to face with my own fears. I have this one little problem. Well, I got a lot of them, but the one I'm referring to is I get lost very easily, and I don't drive well at night, so I very seldom go out at night. Okay, and the reason isn't that I don't know how to drive. Quite frankly, I must know how to drive. I've got over 25 years without an accident. Well, no, that's not entire. Well, it might be. Last accident, no, it's over 10 years without an accident at all. But the reality is I'm running on full discount. But here's the thing that happened last night. I ended up having to go out, and because of the fact that it was dark and I don't handle the changing lights at night very well, as in headlights, I got faced with way too much stress trying to get home. To make matters worse, I got caught in one road closure and one construction zone, which, needless to say, when you take the lights into consideration, creates a problem. So I get home after doing what I had to, got home, and literally just passed out. It was that stressful for me. Didn't have an accident, didn't have any problems with driving as far as the actual legal side of it went, but way too much stress. Net result, because of the way the day had gone, I didn't get the video done first thing in the morning, and then I didn't manage to get it done that night either. So, anyway, that's why I didn't get it done. So what I'm talking about today is this. When you're dealing with whatever is going on in your life, okay, if you run into a stress point, whether it is something like I did, whatever your stress point is, if you're caught too much in the grip of fear, it will wear you out. It will derail your thinking in all likelihood, and it may stop you or interfere with you from getting done what you're aiming at doing. Okay, now this doesn't matter what we're dealing with. Okay, some people will liken it, it's similar, but it's not the same. Do understand, when we talk about PTSD, that is a very real, very, very debilitating problem. I'm just talking about your basic fear, okay, or your basic anxieties. If you live in a house where it is always stressful, where there's always things going on that you do not know how to cope with, okay, it can shut you down. It'll make you tired, okay, because you're always trying to compensate, and mentally speaking, that will wear you out. Now, a little known piece of information I stumbled across a while ago is thinking a lot actually burns calories. Okay, now you don't have to take my word for it. This is just something I read about, and it seems to hold up, in as much as, if you're sitting there just thinking, it can be as tiring. This is why in college and university, lectures are usually kept to an hour and a half long, because the brain gets tired, and it does burn. Anything that moves burns energy. And let's face it, your nervous system fires nerves all the way through. In spite of the fact it's all automated, it still happens. So when you're dealing with something that is stressing you out, okay, you've got to find a stress reliever. Okay, and I'm talking about a positive one. Remember, everything that I work with revolves around 3 laws. Be true to yourself, do unto others as you desire them to do unto you, and energy out, energy in. Okay, so when you're looking at a stress reliever for yourself, keep that in mind. Now, the reality is, fear itself will wear you out. Okay, now I don't make excuses for not getting things done. This is just an explanation as to what happened. Okay, so, and again, having this list handy that I keep talking about is really useful in getting back on track when you get off track. Okay, like, how do I put this? When you're striving to get things done and you don't know exactly how to get them done, that in and of itself can be stressful. And it often is why people actually don't get started in changing their life around. Because where do you start? Because many people are afraid to make the wrong move. Okay, I mean, I've got my own issues around technology. I've gone, like, for instance, and I'm hoping this works today, because as soon as I'm done this, I'll pack up the computer and take it down to Staples to get them to get it turned around. I've got to get some operating programs off this computer onto the new one, and I cannot afford to make a mistake with it. So I'm taking it to somebody that theoretically knows how to do it. If you don't know how to do something, talk to somebody that does. Okay, that's done it successfully before. In my case, computers are not exactly a strong suit for me, but they are a useful tool. Now, if you let fear stop you from doing things, fear is a good thing to stop you from doing certain things. Okay, and that's why kids are born with it. But when you let it debilitate you from doing things that can help you get ahead, that's when it can be a problem. Okay, yesterday I got hit so badly, my stress level went so high, and of course for me, my stress level is, to say the least, a problem to worry, to concern myself with. I found it rather fascinating this morning when I actually checked my blood pressure. Right, I was still way overheated, and after all that stress, when I got up this morning, I did check my blood pressure and what have you, and it's all down right in about as solid as stable level as it can get. So health-wise, I'm doing fine, but fear will still play havoc with you. Doesn't matter how good how relaxed you are. Doesn't matter what kind of shape you're in or what money you've got. It affects people all. It affects them in different ways, but it has the same overall outcome. Many people will not move because of fear. Now, it's obvious when you deal with fear of something. For instance, if you're afraid of dogs and you've got a barking dog in front of you, the fear of that can stop you from moving. A fear of making mistakes can stop you from moving forward. What if you make the wrong move? What if something goes wrong? Well, I like the other side of that, which is what if something goes right? Now, of course, there are a number of people out there that are literally afraid of being successful. And I've often questioned if that may be part of why I procrastinate. Okay, I've got a lot of things that I do desire to get done. I'm working on a number of things. I keep putting off the little things because technology and I have had so much of a problem over the years. I really do look at it with a lot of apprehension, which may seem irrelevant to a lot of people. It's like, how can a computer confuse you? Well, in all fairness, for me, it's actually real easy. Okay, because they don't work the same way. Most people, like, if you've got a cell phone, which you probably do, most people, they have had this problem with pocket dialing, myself included. But that's understandable, okay, especially with the touch tone keys. Okay, my problem with a cell phone is I can be at one end of the house, it can be sitting on the counter at the other end of the house, and it will phone somebody. Now, that sounds like science fiction, but rest assured, there have been enough people over the years that have found out that that's the way it works, right? That have seen the issue of it all of a sudden dialing somebody while I've been elsewhere in the room. It just picks up and phones. I call it counter dialing. So does technology make me edgy? Yes. But I will tell you, getting lost in a city I've been in for 35 years makes me more edgy. And the only way I know of getting around... Oh. The only way I know of getting around that is to avoid that situation. In other words, for me, last night proved it pretty much. It gets past the point of twilight, I stay home. Okay, you pay for a cab, whatever, but you don't drive if you can't. If you're not comfortable driving in a situation, don't. Okay, and this is why I tell people, when you ask somebody if they want to do something and they go no, yes, sometimes encouraging them is necessary. Okay, but there are a great many times when if somebody says no, that's where the discussion ends. You know, if you've got a child and you're trying to get them to do something, for instance, riding a bicycle in the long run will give them freedom. Okay, will give them a sense of freedom, a sense of independence. Okay, however, you know, driving a car is not a requirement. Okay, having some sense of independence is necessary, and learning to ride a bike or trusting your kid to walk to a certain area when you've already ascertained it's a safe zone, okay, is a good thing. But what you'll find is people get more and more afraid. And unfortunately, what I'm finding is that the world is becoming, it's not that it's more dangerous. Well, I guess technically it is. But what's happening is people are paying less and less attention to what they personally are responsible for. And that's what's making it dangerous. Because people are spending so much time pointing the finger at somebody else. Now, where it comes to personal fear, I take a look at it and go, nobody else did it to me. I can actually tell you where my concern around driving came from. Okay, where are we? We're in 221, so we're now looking at 14 years ago. I was driving at night. Now understand, at the time, I would be doing 100 kilometers an hour, aka about 60 miles an hour, in a whiteout, and I wouldn't think twice about it. I was that comfortable. But on this one night in particular, about 14 years ago, I got caught in a traffic jam, and the long story short is I nearly got killed that day. The passengers that were with me said if I had an inch room on either side of my vehicle, when I shot between two semis that were sliding backwards, if I had an inch on either side, I was doing well. Well, as it turned out, I got through that, drove down to finish the trip down to the coast, which was another 3 hours down the road. Did the weekend no problem. However, when I was driving home and went to make the turn to go back onto the same road that I'd nearly been killed on, I call it nearly killed. I didn't actually get hit. Right, but I mean, an inch on either side of the car is not a lot of room. But when I got back to the road that I was supposed to go on, my hands started shaking so bad I couldn't hang on to the steering wheel. So I pulled over and went, I'm not making the drive the rest of the night. Fortunately, one of the other passengers was more than willing to step into the driver's seat, so I went to sleep in the back seat. Right, they drove us home, we got home safe, but since then, I've not been able to drive comfortably. Not when I can't see clearly, not when the weather's not, functional. I don't have a problem driving in the rain. I have a problem driving in the snow, or more to the point, I used to. I don't drive in the snow now, I'm not going. It solves a lot of problems on that end. But fear will stop you from getting anywhere. Okay. Is it necessary to overcome fear? Well, in my opinion, yeah. Is it always possible? No. After that near accident, I talked to my father because it had been a few months and I still couldn't do anything with it. And I asked him how to deal with it. And he looks at me and he says, in all honesty, he says, you may never get past that. And sad to say, thus far, he's been right. I've still been able to keep driving. My driving record is still perfectly fine. But do I have the wherewithal, as it were, to comfortably get into a car and drive across the country, in the dark in the middle of the winter anymore? No. Okay, I just don't have it anymore. Is it somewhere there? Certainly. And could I probably dig it up? Absolutely. The problem comes when you realize that I don't have any interest to dig up that ability anymore. So I just simply built my life around it otherwise. The same can be done with just about every fear. Now, certain ones like PTSD, okay, post-traumatic stress disorder, it's not something you necessarily overcome. It's something you learn to cope with. Okay. Now, there are situations where people can get past it. Okay. In my case, I suffer from it triggered by the hospital. And frankly, I'm not interested in putting myself through that much stress. So I find ways around it. Number one, I don't get ill. That solves that problem. Right. I mean, I haven't, aside from from a heart attack and a stroke, I haven't been sick in a quarter of a century here. Okay. Last time was way back then. Yeah, it would have been about that long ago when I had double pneumonia. Other than that, like the common cold, the flu, I just don't. But a fear of things, and when you take a look at germaphobes, true germaphobes have a massively debilitating fear. Okay. And fear will stop you not only from attaining your goals, it will interfere with your time frames, it will screw up your ability to actually function. Okay. But it will only mess up your ability to function if you actually permit it. Now, many fears you can get around, like the one I was talking about. I don't have a problem getting around it. I just don't put myself in that situation. Okay. When you're afraid of certain things, there's all sorts of things you can go into. There are too many variables to bother with. And each and every one of these fears is equally viable. It's equally important to whoever suffers from them. There's not one single fear that I know of that is less important to the person suffering from it than the next. Now, certainly, if you don't suffer from that fear, okay, number one, it won't matter to you that much. And number two, you may not be able to relate to it. Now, I personally like knowing what somebody else's phobias are so that I don't accidentally trigger them. Okay. Too many people find out what the phobia is and then go, gee, I'm just going to play with that because it's funny. And rest assured, to the person suffering from the fear, it's not funny. Okay. This is why I have this issue of when you talk about scaring people, there are certain times when that is expected. If you're going to a horror movie, then absolutely. And there are people that love to be scared. Okay, that love this kind of genre. I won't set foot in a horror movie, not because I'm afraid of being scared, frightened by the horror movie. Okay, I just don't like the genre. But the moment you find out somebody is afraid of something, okay, you do not use that as a tool to either find entertainment for yourself, which, by the way, is what pranking really is. How do I enjoy myself by making somebody else uncomfortable? This is where it comes back to the idea of do unto others as you desire them to do unto you. If you've got a fear, okay, even if it's a fear of meeting strangers. Now, a fear of meeting strangers can be overcome. I used to have a massive problem with it until somebody showed me how to do it. And it was funny because they didn't show me how to do it by going, here's step 1, step 2, step 3, go and do it. They literally took me out and all we did was go for coffee. Now, at the time, I couldn't talk to a stranger. And absolutely it wasn't going to happen if it was a female unless they started the conversation with me. Okay. But this chap took me out for coffee every day for 6 months. And he was just himself. He just talked to everybody that was there. Okay. And at one point, I finally ended up coming out of that, that mute state where I actually said something. Okay. And I'll tell you, the look on his face was priceless. Because he turned around, he looks at me, he says, you just broke the barrier. He goes, well done, you finally spoke to somebody you've got no idea who they were, and in all fairness, it was simply a waitress. But even waitresses I never spoke to aside from, here's my order, now leave me alone sort of thing. I didn't tell them that. It was just, I was very cut and dried. Here's the order I've got. And that was where the conversation ended. But that's just one of those things where, yes, the fear was there, but I managed to overcome it. Okay, I had a lot of guidance. Like I said, it took this guy 6 months. Okay, in 6 months to 30 days, we were going out daily. So you're looking at 180 times out for coffee. Closer to 360 because we often went out twice a day. Okay. Now, the thing is that when you've got a fear, when you are dealing with fear, if you're trying to get something done and you get hit broadside, for instance, a circumstance in your house that you just do not know how to cope with, and there are many of you stuck in that situation or that see yourself as stuck. Ironically, if you see yourself as stuck in a situation, you are. Okay, it doesn't have to make any sense to anybody else. But when you're in that environment, if that environment is debilitating, if it brings up all kinds of fears, getting anything else accomplished while you're in that environment is going to be problematic. Yes, you will learn to cope with it, but that doesn't mean you'll learn to enjoy it. It doesn't mean that you'll be comfortable in it. It just means you basically learn to buckle down and move forward. Okay, now, in a situation like that, more often than not, what I've found happens with people is they end up holding up, whether it's they grab a book, they put their headset on so they can't hear anybody, and they just read, or whether they sleep through it. Okay. Methods of coping are all over the place. The one method that I really caution people with is the number of people that turn to alcohol or drugs to avoid that stress. Because the problem is, both alcohol and drugs, all they do is knock out the learned and trained inhibitors. In other words, the thing you're actually trying to learn that you're doing to try and cope with a problem, you're wiping out what little coping mechanism you have. How do I know? I used to drink a 26er a night. Okay. So, been there, done that. It didn't do a thing for me. Worked out well for the person I actually got into it for, but that was a strange story in itself. But, with that in mind, okay, fear, if you let it rule you, will stop you from getting things. Now, of course, the problem is that when you're in the middle of the fear, of whatever's causing the fear, you're going to have a problem, because it will, in all likelihood, wear you out, which is what happened to me last night. Okay, is it wore me out so badly I passed out. Now, normally I sleep 3 or 4 hours. Well, last night I ended up passing out shortly after 9 o'clock. Okay, I didn't wake up until after, what time was it? I guess probably somewhere close to 6 this morning. Right, which is like 2 to 3 times my normal sleep. And I still didn't wake up rested. Okay, but what ends up happening is you get into that fear state and you end up wearing yourself out, so you'll probably end up crashing or whatever. Okay, there are those of you that have the other side, the other way of coping with stress. Okay. You know, the issue of coping with stress. Some of you turn to doing that silly thing that they call comfort eating. Now, I will tell you this. There are groups that will help you deal with that. Because I know and it's not a question of I comfort ate. You know, I boredom ate for a while. But there are groups that will help you deal with that. And I will tell you, the number of people I've talked to that have said, yeah, I know I'm overweight by, 100 pounds, but I'm comfortable that way. And I will tell you, from everything I've seen, it's not a question of being comfortable. It's not, oh, I'm healthy and I know this. I've heard people tell me they were healthy, and I'll tell you, if you're 100 pounds overweight, you're not healthy. But it's that fear of stepping out of that comfort zone. This is what I'm used to. This is what I'm familiar with. And that's a lot of why people stay in the environments they're in, is because of that fear that we've been taught that change is painful, change is difficult. Okay, and change is frightening. Well, you've been listening, if you've been listening to me this long, and I do mean just this particular session, you've been listening for 25 minutes, and every time I uttered a single word, or took a breath, or moved my head, you were going through change. And if change was going to cause fear, okay, that would do it. Now, of course, if you've been looking at my face for the last 25 minutes, you could be suffering from fear anyway. But that fear can be problematic. Okay, but the reason people don't change the path they're on is more often than not, in my experience, because they have reached a comfort zone where they're coping with what they've got. Doesn't mean they're happy. It means they're coping. And if you're in that position because it's familiar, okay, it may be time to start talking to people to figure out how to get out of that. Now, one of the best things I found where it comes to a number of things is get yourself occupied doing something else that takes up more of your mind. Now, for me, it used to be gaming. Okay, I used to be able to get so tied up in gaming, in playing Dungeons and Dragons and what have you, that for that couple of hours, right, that was where my mind was locked. As it stands, my brain is working way too fast, and even gaming doesn't do that. If I'm having an off day, even my role-playing will suffer. Okay, which is not good news from my standpoint, because I'm not giving up gaming. That's just not going to happen. Not anytime soon, anyway. I mean, I'm sure when I die I will, but, well, maybe not. We'll figure that out. But if you let fear dictate what you do, if you let that fear of change or that fear of success or whatever dictate whether you're going to move forward, you're going to find that you're not quite as content as you would like to be. Okay, so with that in mind, take the time to really look at where your life is, and this is where we come back to that other thing. Your life is running in a certain fashion right now, and we are all in exactly the same place. Okay, so right here, right now, is where we start changing the way the energy in your life is working. But you're the only one that can actually make that happen. Now, on that note, because I keep these down to the half hour, I'm going to bring this to a close. I will talk to you again tomorrow. Tomorrow what was it? Tomorrow I've got another issue. I already know what I'm dealing with. But I will see you again either tomorrow or the next day. I may miss a day or two. It depends entirely on whether I get my computer back tomorrow. So we will see what happens. Okay. But until then, take care of yourselves and each other. And for pity's sakes, stay positive.